In 1937, Roxy and her husband Aaron work on their struggling tobacco farm, 10 miles from Tarboro, North Carolina. That evening, while Aaron plays banjo by the window, Roxy sews a dress for their daughter in bed. She notices their wedding photo on the table, remembering how her grandmother passed away 5 years ago. At the funeral, Roxy's father Will and his new wife Ruth came, and Aaron asked Roxy if she wanted to move in with her father, but she felt uneasy about it. In the present, Aaron pulls Roxy closer to the bed, and they share a moment together. She reminds him she wanted to be close the night before, but he declined because he had to wake early. Roxy worries she might have hurt his feelings, so she kisses him and they connect. Afterward, Aaron gets dressed and leaves the room. The next day, Will chats with friends on the porch of his funeral home. He and Ruth notice Jack, a stranger with a suitcase, and joke about him looking for work, but Will says he can't hire anyone now. Meanwhile, Roxy, seeing Jack from a car, wonders who he is. He approaches Will, asking to speak with him, and the older men direct him inside. Later, Aaron and Roxy drive away with their daughter, Baby. The next day, Aaron's parents visit, offering him a ride to town, but he decides to stay home and plant seedlings. He suggests Roxy and Baby join his parents instead. As Roxy gets ready, Aaron waits in the living room. At the funeral home, Ruth greets them and takes Baby. Callie, Roxy's half-sister, leads Baby to the backyard to share news, but Raider, her half-brother, pops out to scare them, telling a story about a body from school. Eventually, the teen tells Roxy about a new funeral home and how flattered she felt when Jack complimented her. Meanwhile, Will shares with his friends that Jack helped him with a body the night before but regrets he can't hire him, even though he sees potential in him as a mortician. Just then, Jack sneaks up behind Strother, scaring him and making the others laugh. Roxy watches the fun from a distance. 2 weeks later, she sees the hearse pull up to their house. Instead of her father, Jack approaches her and introduces himself, but she quickly pulls her hand back. Roxy asks why he's there, and Jack explains that Will sent him to help on the farm. Moments later, Aaron arrives and sets Jack to work right away. As she watches them through the window, Roxy remembers a dream where Jack spoke to her late grandmother. Although she is busy cooking dinner, Aaron says he'll take Jack to town and will be back soon. However, he returns hours later, saying he stopped for a meal. He mentions that Jack will come back next Saturday to help fix the well and that he gave him a mandolin string for his banjo. On Saturday morning, while Roxy prepares dinner, she recalls her grandmother saying that bad things always happened in March. That evening, Jack joins them for dinner, and Roxy hears him compliment her cooking. A few days later, Aaron invites Jack over to play music together. That night, Roxy and Baby listen to them by the fire, and Roxy finds herself glancing at Jack. Over the next few weeks, she notices her husband and Jack forming a real friendship. Later, she overhears Aaron telling Jack a story about his high school girlfriend. When Aaron sees Roxy, he quickly changes the subject and asks Jack about his parents. Jack replies that they are both gone. One afternoon, Jack walks into the house and sees Roxy getting ready for a bath. Embarrassed, she covers herself and tells him her husband isn't home. Suddenly, he leans closer and whispers that she's pretty, then quickly steps back and leaves, leaving her confused. That evening, Aaron suggests that Jack stay in the spare room since it's hard to drive back in the rain and mud. The next day, Jack agrees, and Aaron tells Roxy to clear out the dresser in the spare room. That night, just as the couple is about to be close, they hear a knock at the door. Aaron opens it, and Jack steps in with his belongings, ready to move in. Later, Roxy feels upset when she hears Aaron tell Jack he can use the truck any time to visit Ava. As she lies awake in bed, she hears the truck start and wonders if Jack is going to see her. The next morning, Roxy finds out that Jack went to help a friend with a car accident. One day, Aaron tells Roxy he needs to go to his father's farm to fix a fence. Since he promised to look after their daughter, he takes her with him. Moments later, while Roxy brushes her hair outside, Jack suddenly appears. She thought he was away, but instead of answering her, he pulls her close, and they share a moment in the tobacco fields. When it's time to harvest, Aaron gathers his workers and expresses optimism about this year's crop. Roxy treats the workers and children with homemade fudge, and another woman brings out a watermelon. Just then, Jack drives by, and they exchange a meaningful glance. Later, the family and workers tie the leaves onto drying racks in the barn. That night, while Aaron stays in the barn to oversee the curing process, Roxy sneaks in, and they share another moment together. The next day, as they continue harvesting, Roxy remembers all the secret meetings she had with Jack. During lunch, she and Jack share knowing smiles across the table. After the meal, everyone else returns to work, and Roxy picks up Jack's shirt left on his chair, gently caressing and smelling it. That night, since it's Jack's turn to watch the curing, they come together again. The following morning, Aaron suggests they go to his family's 4th of July barbecue, but Roxy says she doesn't want to go because the noise makes her anxious. When Aaron insists that his family is expecting them, she firmly says she won't go, frustrating him. Later, Roxy wipes her face with a damp cloth and begins lunch by boiling peas. In her room, she sits in front of the mirror, tracing the lines on her hand. She recalls her grandmother saying she has a long lifeline and a double love line. Suddenly, Jack enters the room, and they share a kiss. He tells her he has a gift for her, but she asks him to wait until she changes the baby's diaper. Later, Roxy uses the gift, a camera, to take a picture of Jack holding the toddler. Jack goes inside to grab some string so they can take a photo together. However, they are so focused on posing that they don't notice the baby climbing the steps and entering the house. Suddenly, they hear the baby cry and find her on the floor next to an overturned pot, suggesting she reached for it and got hurt by the boiling water. In the hospital, Roxy is upset as she explains what happened to her husband when he arrives. The doctor hands her toddler back and says they can go home. Roxy notices the bandages on the child's legs and asks if there will be scars. The doctor replies that it's likely. Later, Roxy asks Jack about the camera, and he tells her he hid it. That night, she wakes up to find her husband and child missing from the bed. She finds them by the front steps, and Aaron, angry, makes it clear that their daughter's injuries are her fault. Roxy changes the bandages on the baby's legs, but when she returns to bed, Aaron turns away, showing that he hasn't forgiven her. The next day, Aaron says he won't be able to get back to work until after the first batch of tobacco is sold. He mentions he told Jack they would manage on their own after the sale. He also hints that people at church think it looks bad for another man to live in their house, making Roxy wonder if he knows about her affair. That evening, Roxy goes to the barn to talk to Jack. Instead of discussing their situation, he tells her he loves her, and they share a close moment. Afterward, Roxy tells Jack he needs to leave. He suggests she could run away with him, but she reminds him that she is married and has a daughter. The next day, Aaron asks if she spoke to Jack about leaving the farm, and she replies that she did. Later, the men watch as buyers place bids on their goods. That night, Roxy kisses Aaron to congratulate him on a successful market day, which annoys Jack. During the celebration, Roxy and Aaron enjoy the fireworks with the townspeople, hoping they can move on from the affair. The next day, Roxy finds Jack trying to take down an insect nest in the barn. She warns him to be careful, or he might get stung. When Jack unexpectedly kisses her, she quickly walks away. After dinner, Jack tells Aaron he should check out a strange animal he found in the barn. Hours later, Jack returns alone, looking tense and urgent. He tells Roxy to pack her suitcase because they need to leave right away. Confused and concerned, she complies but asks where her husband is. Jack's response is vague. He says he'll explain later, which only heightens her anxiety. The next morning, they arrive at a rundown tourist camp, and Jack manages to get them a room. Inside, Roxy feels a wave of despair and tells Jack that she wants to go home. It's then that he finally admits the truth. He killed Aaron by hitting him with a shovel and buried him behind the barn. The weight of his confession crashes down on her, and in her distress and anger, she pushes him away and collapses onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. After they take a nap, Jack stirs and says they need to leave soon, but after kissing her, he notices the look of fear and uncertainty in her eyes. He suddenly realizes he was presumptuous to think she would simply run away with him after everything that had happened. He mentions a friend in Birmingham where he could stay and promises to come back for her when things settle down. Once he leaves, Roxy holds her daughter tightly. In desperation, she seeks help from the caretaker of the camp, feeling lost and alone. Later, a police officer arrives at the camp. He informs Roxy that they apprehended Jack just before he boarded a bus out of town. The officer reveals that Jack told the authorities where he buried Aaron, sending another wave of panic through Roxy. The officer also mentions that Jack claimed they planned the murder together, which leaves Roxy feeling trapped and betrayed. At the police station, the officer informs her that her arraignment is set for Monday morning. Outside the funeral home, Will, Roxy's father, grapples with his own guilt for having hired Jack, believing his decision ultimately led to his son-in-law's tragic demise. Eventually, he approaches Roxy and gently tells her that she needs to see her late husband's body, which deepens her grief. While Roxy sobs next to the coffin, her father comes over, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, trying to offer solace in a time of overwhelming sorrow. Days pass, and soon the story of the love triangle and the tragic events unfolds in the local newspaper, drawing unwanted attention and speculation. Ruth, Roxy's mother-in-law, enters Roxy's room one afternoon, holding a simple black dress she has carefully chosen for the arraignment. She offers it to Roxy, hoping it will provide her a sense of dignity for the difficult day ahead. The following day, as Roxy steps out of the car outside the courthouse, she is immediately swarmed by reporters and photographers, their flashing cameras capturing every moment of her despair. When the bailiff brings Jack out, she quickly looks away, unable to face the man who has turned her life upside down. In his confession, Jack claims he killed Aaron because Roxy couldn't leave with him due to her marriage, suggesting that her husband's death was something she secretly wanted. When Roxy is called to the stand, she admits that the affair was consensual and that she genuinely wanted to be with Jack in the barn. The lawyer presses her, asking if they were together every day since it began. She responds affirmatively, noting that they only held back when her husband was home or when she was unwell. As the lawyer argues for a harsh punishment, Jack suddenly stands up, declaring that Roxy never intended to run away with him. He insists that he forced her into the car after killing Aaron, claiming she was unaware of what had happened until much later, which prompted her to hide. This testimony sways the jury, who ultimately finds Roxy not guilty of conspiracy to murder, while Jack is convicted of first-degree murder. The following day, Roxy overhears her father, Will, discussing the possibility of sending her to live with relatives for a while, but Ruth quickly opposes this idea. Soon after, Ruth enters Roxy's room and tenderly wipes her face with a cloth. She opens up about how she struggled to say no to Jack at the tourist camp, admitting that the only other time she had said no was to Aaron on the 4th of July. Ruth offers words of comfort, reassuring Roxy that the worst is now behind her. As they make their way back to the farm, Will suggests that Roxy and Baby stay with Aunt Kate for some time to recover. However, Roxy firmly insists that she won't spend her whole life in Tarboro, even though she acknowledges that her daughter needs to be around family right now. She adds that she is prepared to face the repercussions of her choices, just like their resilient family has done for generations, knowing they have always endured tough times together.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.